am really excited to talk to people about intermittent fasting because I have such a story about it and it's helped me a lot. And I've done a lot of research. So I'm going to be citing a couple of books that I have been just using as my Bible religiously. But I wanted to kind of share the story about how it started. We were on vacation. We just left our son's house in outside of Washington, D.C., and we wanted to do some touring of some of the older homes in the eastern part of the country before we headed back to Nevada. And I remember we were in this house that was built like in the 1800s, and I was enthralled with their sink and with their kitchen because I'm a foodie. And so I'm pretending like I'm washing the dishes, and I said to my husband, hey, take a picture of me. I want to show that, I actually could wash dishes and without a dishwasher. And so he did, and a few weeks later when we were home and we were looking at those pictures, it was a side view of me, and I was like, that can't be me. Can it be me? Do I really look like that? I don't know if anybody's done that with a picture or not, but it was like my pivotal point. It's like, okay, I've got to really do something because I knew that it wasn't just the way I looked. That was just a manifestation of how I felt, and I wasn't feeling, super great because I was feeling aging a little bit. And so I started to think, what can I do? And I didn't really ever want to go on a diet because I am a foodie. I love to eat, and I didn't want to have to give up something. So I actually, at that time, my friend on Facebook was showing me, showing what she had done, and I started taking one of her drinks, and it was okay. And then I found out not too much later, it had so much sugar in it. And I was like, wait a second, I'm trying to get rid of sugar because I'm a sugar addict. So anyway, it did kind of ease me into, all right, you can do something like this. It was beneficial. There were some good ingredients too, and I played on that, and I'll share that with you a little bit later. But what was really the tipping point was a few months after that. It was the middle of COVID. It was just about Christmas time. And so, we hadn't seen a lot of people. And a knock came on my door, which was unusual because, we just didn't get out and see people. And I looked at the guy that was standing at my front door with a present in his hand. And I was kind of like, who is he? And I'm sure my face asked that question, like, who are you? And he said, hey, Merry Christmas. And then I knew, and it was a guy from my church that, of course, I hadn't seen in over 9 months, and he had lost so much weight, I literally did not recognize him. And I said, what on earth have you done to look so good? I felt kind of funny, giving a guy a compliment like that. But he told me, he said, well, it was a matter of life and death, because he said, I'm type 2 diabetic, and I was starting to lose my vision. And my doctor warned me, and he said that was my wake-up call. I knew I had to do something. And that conversation, just standing at my door, and he started talking to me about insulin resistance, which I had never heard of before. I kind of knew insulin went along with diabetes, and I understand a little bit more about the difference between type 1 diabetics and type 2, because we have a really close family member that's a type 1, and it's kind of a sad thing. She lives with an insulin pump, but that's a good thing. But it's all the way different. Type 2 is the one that's more like lifestyle. And my dad had that, and I remember thinking, I never want to have that, but I'll never get old, haha. So anyway, when he told me that he was type 2, and that these were some of the consequences, it was like my motivation. So I started studying some of the books that he shared with me that helped him. And one is by a guy, he's not a medical doctor, he's a PhD doctor, and his name is Ben Bickman. And the name of the book is Why We Get Sick. And, just listening to that book, because I'm a big Audible person, and I listen to it a lot when I'm doing the dishes or whatever I can do to learn while I'm doing those kinds of tasks. I went, oh my goodness, look what I'm doing to my body. So I was modifying my behavior because I was learning about the science of it. And I will be honest, I was probably a little scared too, realizing that our cells are so important. And I do supplement, I have a really great cellular supplement that keeps my cells healthy, but I also need to keep my cells healthy through what I'm feeding them. So after I read Dr. Bickman's book and I started to do more research, then I became familiar with intermittent fasting. So that was my journey about how I found out about this. And, truth be told, I remember thinking, okay, so people are fasting and like not eating, and then they're starving themselves. And we fast once a month for religious reasons. And I know after that 24 hours, I sometimes overeat. And I just thought, first of all, that's always a little difficult for me to do that, a 24-hour fast. And then, I always have a big dinner, and then sometime I'm not feeling great because I ate too much. So that was my history. And I thought, I don't get it. So what I did is I went to the experts, and those are the things that I'm going to share with you today. And one of the first books that I read that I recommend, I'm just giving you like the surfacey things. There's 2 books. One is called Fast, Feast, Repeat, or maybe it's Feast, Fast, Repeat. I forget. And this lady's name is Jen Stevens. And I'll put those down in the notes so you have those. And I'm going to go quote her about all the benefits. But the other guy, he wrote this book called The Obesity Code. And I remember I did check it out one time from Audible, but I was probably just not ready for it because it sounded so boring to me. So he wrote this book about the obesity code. So I'm going to start today with some of his comments about this, because he is a medical doctor and he was a nephrologist, a kidney doctor. And he just said he kept noticing that a lot of his patients with kidney problems were, oh, thank you. Yeah, Jason Fong. Have you read the book, Debbie? Have you just put the notes?
Yep.
Okay, so you're familiar with him. Okay, that's good. What do you think? What are your feelings about that? I mean, have you backed him?
It was recommended to me by my mother-in-law, who is a type 2 diabetic, and it has changed her life. So I've been reading it and thinking of adopting that lifestyle. And then when I saw you talking about it, it was like it was meant to be.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? That's how I felt about it too, because remember I read it one time, but I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready, but it took me seeing what my friend did and understanding about insulin resistance, which we're going to talk about here. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jason's, and the book I actually have right now, it's called The Obesity Code Cookbook. So I'm just taking these notes from his preface, and I haven't even gotten to the recipes yet. But I wanted to explain it pretty simply to people. So what he said is that he noticed that a lot of his patients that were on dialysis were type 2 patients, type 2 diabetes. And he's like, that started him on his journey, figuring out like there's something more here. So what he decided, or what he came up with, is that the main problem is with obesity is not the number of calories that we eat, but it's how they're spent. And the main hormone that we need to focus on is insulin. See, I have a family member that lives on insulin. So to me, I'm thinking, okay, she has to have that every day. Well, so do we. And insulin is this. It's a fat storing hormone. And that's what its job is. It's to store fat. So we're probably like, what? We don't like insulin. But guess what? We need it. So what happens is when we eat, then insulin production goes up, and it tells our body to store some of this energy as body fat, because we need body fat. The problem is I have too much. But now when we don't eat, then insulin production goes down, and then the body starts to burn the fat that it's already stored. So that's really the sequence of it. But he said what happens is that if we have too much insulin, is that our body is told to store more body fat than what we need. So here's what I just love. He said everything about human metabolism, including body weight, depends upon our hormone signaling. Okay, so it's a hormonal problem is what he came down to. He said our body doesn't respond to calories. There are no calorie receptors on our cells. That's really true. I mean, our body doesn't really know what we're eating. And he used the example of, so let's say you have 200 calories of kale. is not the same as 200 calories of chocolate. So, and I kind of thought that. And that was one of the things that I was turned off to so many weight loss programs, is because, well, I'll be honest, so I did Weight Watchers for a while. And I remember one day we were traveling and we went to Wendy's and I got a Frosty because it was in the program. I mean, whatever they do at Weight Watchers, I forget the points or whatever. And I remember the guy saying, oh, I need to be on a diet like that. And I remember thinking, but this isn't anything that's good for my body, but it's on the program. So that always bothered me. So anyway, let's go back to a little bit. He said, if our body doesn't count calories, why should we? And the other thing is, I'm not really like a numbers person when it comes to these things. I'm analytical, but my mind doesn't think in numbers. And so I started thinking, now my math teacher, told me that I had to learn math. Well, I don't want to learn math because I want to have to count calories. So there we go. So obesity is hormonal, not a caloric imbalance. And so it's what we eat, the kinds of foods, not just the calories, and also when we eat, that is the big difference. And this is going to influence our ability to manage our weight gain, and our weight loss. So again, I'm going to quote him. He said, obesity is a hormonal dysregulation of fat accumulation. We get fat because we've given our body the hormonal signal to gain body fat. The main hormonal signal, that's that kind of a mouthful. The main hormonal signal is insulin, and that level goes up or down according to to our diet. So, in his opinion, it's insulin that causes obesity. And as our insulin levels go up, then our body weight goes up. Now, once we understand that obesity is a hormonal imbalance, we can begin to treat it, because that's where we can begin to know what kinds of foods to eat and when. That's the big thing, is also on the when. Since too much insulin causes obesity, treatment demands that we lower our insulin levels. Okay, that's the main thing. We've got to lower our insulin levels. And he said everybody knows that once you go on insulin, you gain weight. And I thought just the opposite. But then I realized my friends that were diagnosed with type 2, not everybody on type 2 has to go on insulin, and I won't go down that path, but it wasn't because they were taking insulin, it's because they were now eating the right kinds of foods. So that's why that's why they lost weight. And my friend that I told you about earlier, he didn't take care of his eating habits. So that was what the problem was. So again, the question is not how to balance calories, but how do we balance our insulin? Because that is our fat storing hormone. So there we go. That's how easy it is. So we can eat more foods. The insulin levels will increase in two circumstances: by eating more foods that stimulate insulin, or by eating the same foods but more frequently. So there we go. But the main thing is there are no drugs that will control this insulin. It is a change in what we eat. Okay, that's how it is. So what we eat, again, is determining how high our insulin spikes, and when we eat determines how present insulin is. Okay, so if we want to lower our fat storage, we want to lower our insulin, and this, in his opinion, can be done even with a high-carb diet. All right, and again, I'll let you go back and look at some of his books. Those were the main points right there. But here it is right here, his main statement. Combining a low insulin diet with proper meal timing is the most powerful way to control your weight. So I'm going to say that again. Combining a low insulin diet with proper meal timing is the most powerful way to control your weight. And he said if you allow your body to spend time in that fasting state, we're going to use up the energy. That gives our body the ability to use up some of that stored energy, and it will start to burn fat. But again, if you have too much insulin, it's not going to have an opportunity to do that. So that's like the sciencey part of it that I read, that I got it. I'm like, okay, I go into these groups. I'm in a bunch of groups like with people, women in menopause, and they're saying, oh my gosh, yeah, I've done all these things. I don't eat anything, and I exercise, and I'm not losing weight, and it's so discouraging, and it's not good for our body. So I came across, and I don't even know how I met this Jen Stevens, and this is where I'm going to give you some of her benefits and then tell you my experience here.